I was very starstruck because I walk in there and it has all these like gold records from like, Chris Isaak recorded Wicked Game there and, love him so much. And so I think feeling kind of like walking into this hallowed space, there's still that rock star giddiness in me. I don't want to lose that little dream. But I'm tempering that with realism. I just realized that, it's $100 an hour. And if I'm going to really do this and make this slick, really well put together, radio friendly album, I want to work with the best. And I need to raise the money because I don't make the kind of money in my day job that I can do that.
You're listening to The Creative Imposter, episode number 59. Welcome to The Creative Imposter. I'm Andrea Klunder, your host, and today, once again, we have something new. A man. Really, seriously, in 2+ years of hosting this podcast, I have only ever interviewed women, and that was never my intention. It just sort of was a product of the communities that I find myself in. Today, we are talking with Dylan Rice, musician, singer, songwriter, and arts administrator, and also my former roommate from in the episode, we try to figure out just exactly how long ago. So I'll let that be a little suspenseful for you. But I wanted to have Dylan on the show today because he has always inspired me as a musician, as a by the bootstraps, grassroots, self-producing your albums, making it happen musician. And also because he is one of the most generous artists and friends I have ever known. In fact, I'm going to tell you a little secret. Right after we ended our interview, it had been a while. We've been kind of, Facebook friends and whatnot, but it had been a while since we had actually connected on a real level or sat down and had coffee or a conversation or anything like that. But right after our interview ended, Dylan immediately said, "So what are you up to? How can I help you? How can I support you? Who can I connect you with? How can I return this favor to you?" I mean, who does that? Dylan. And what inspired me to have Dylan on the show is that he is in the process of recording his 3rd studio album. And I know this because I received an email from Dylan letting me know that he's going to be launching an Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign in order to raise money for said studio album. It's not cheap to do it and do it well. And rather than that email just being like, "Hey, I'm making this album. I need to raise money. Please give me money and please share it on social media," he actually said, "Creative friends, please help support this venture by contributing something from your art, from your life, from your work as a perk for the crowdfunding campaign." So he is in effect crowdsourcing his perks for his crowdfunding campaign. And I just thought this was brilliant because I immediately felt encouraged and inspired to put together a package for him and create something, partly because it feels more creative than just sending money. I mean, don't get me wrong, I will also at the very least be pre-ordering his album. But it just felt like such a great way to bring in the community feeling and support behind what it is that you're doing, behind your art and behind your vision. And also because, as I mentioned, he is so generous with supporting everyone else in the work that they're doing that it only seems right that I would reciprocate. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the impetus behind that strategy on crowdfunding. We're going to talk about imposter syndrome and musicianship and being a performer. And we're also going to talk about something that I think doesn't get talked about that much because it doesn't seem that glamorous, which is being an artist, being a creator, being an entrepreneur while having a day job. Dylan has done both. He's had a day job while he's made music, and he's also quit that day job while he's made music. And there are pros and cons, of course, to both scenarios. And I love what he has to say because I think sometimes if we are working full time in an office job or a corporate job and also trying to make things and be an artist or a content creator, sometimes we can feel a little bit like a fake. Like if somebody says, "What do?" You feel obliged to tell them about your full-time job, even if that's not your heart and that's not your passion. And if you say, "Oh, I'm a musician," or "Oh, I'm an artist," or "Oh, I'm working on a novel," it sometimes feels weird, like you're somehow lying or something. Like you can't do and be both. Okay, this is enough of me ranting and rambling about Dylan. I'm excited to share this conversation with you. I do hope that you will check out Dylan's music, his 2 previous albums, which are available in all the places where you can download and find music. I will link to them. And also the Indiegogo campaign, which is live right now, including fabulous creative perks from his friends and community, including a lovely meditation package from me. The Indiegogo campaign is live until February 21st, 2018. So if you are listening to this episode before then, please check it out. See if there's a way that you'd like to contribute and get some new music in your earbuds and grab one of these creative perks. The links to all things Dylan Rice will be in the show notes for this episode, number 59, at thecreativeimpaster.com/059. Okay, here's Dylan Rice.
Oh God, there's something about you, the lines are erased. There's something about you that sells interchange. There's something about you now, and now, something about you. If you're ever gone, I'm nowhere without you. My light in the fog, I'm nowhere without you. I grew up never safe, cause of my sense of place, sense you didn't.
So Dylan Rice, thank you so much for being on The Creative Imposter today.
Thank you so much, Andrea, former roommate. Can I say that?
Former roommate. You can say that. Yes. In fact, I was trying to think earlier about how old we were. Because even if I say that we met in 2001, I think it was, for some reason, that doesn't sound super long ago to me. But if I say, I think I was 22 when I met you.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, if you do the math, we were just fresh-faced, earnest 20-somethings that, made very little money. But we found joy in inexpensive delights to me.
Yeah. So you are a musician. You're a singer, you're a songwriter, yes. You're a guitarist. Yes. And I was thinking about how at the time when we became roommates, you were also all of those things. And I was I think my main focus was theater at that time. I think I was still acting. And yeah. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I was still naive enough to feel like, oh, I have this super creative musician roommate who's going to get his big break and then be like a full-time touring, recording musician. And I'm still waiting for my big break and I'm going to be a full-time theater person. And I had full confidence that these things were going to happen. Is that what happened?
Well, no. No, so it's funny because as I get older, I try to look at life. Having no expectations or low expectations usually elicits, greater happiness. So you're pleasantly surprised by success, but you don't create like this sort of distorted sense of reality that you're going to be discovered and be saved. A couple things happened. So I think I burned out. I was doing all of the work myself, and not all of it, but I was doing most of the work in terms of promoting shows, booking my own shows, scheduling rehearsals, on top of writing the melodies and the core guitar parts and then teaching them to other musicians. And, when you burn your candle both ends, it catches up to you. And I got really close to a record deal. I released my first album and got some attention from this guy who was working with Sony, and he was going to start an album for LGBT artists. Sorry, not album, a record label for LGBT artists. And he liked my sound. And so I had like sort of an option with Sony. And then the option basically had a clock that ran out. So I had a year and a half where I was tied up in this contract where they said they may decide to sign me for a record deal within that 18 months. And then they ended up not doing it. And I had a lot of my money and time and heart invested in that. When someone dangles your dream like a carrot, it can be devastating when it doesn't happen. So I think, burning out on top of a major disappointment, I had to kind of regroup and just figure out, well, like, what am I making music for? What is the long game, or what's fulfilling about it? And I just kind of had this moment where I was like, well, you know what? I really love the process of creating something out of nothing. So the part of, making new, right? And then I love connecting with audiences. And it could be connecting with them in person, on stage. It could be connecting with them, online. And also like being a part of a community of musicians, creatively and emotionally. And I had to sort of allow myself those things to regroup and decide that, I don't need a major label to tell me whether I'm legitimate or not. First of all, that's really frightening, giving something like that the power over you. But I think when you are struggling financially and you have big dreams and you come from a struggling middle-class background and you're dealing with, issues of, just to be completely frank, dealing with issues of self-loathing for being gay and thinking that, well, I'm getting a lot of attention and, a lot of success in this music thing. Maybe I can deal with this sort of shame for being gay by being the best, richest, most famous, musician. So I had to really kind of do a lot of work on myself and be like, that is a kind of messed up way to think about it. It's really not healthy. But that's how I was when I was 25. I was desperate to heal those wounds, but I was going about them the wrong way.
Yeah. And I think that it's pretty common for artistic people to really attach a lot of their self-worth to what it is that they're creating. And not only what they're creating, but how it's received, right? Because as a musician or as an actor or even as a podcaster, it's fine to create those things, but those are all forms of self-expression that really need an audience. And so you kind of like start to put your identity and your self-worth in how well that audience is or is not receiving what it is that you're creating, and also how big or how small that audience is. I think that's a huge issue for people who are, inherently creative, because what you create is like a part of you. It's like an extension of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The audience thing was a big problem for me, in that I would be booking shows at these clubs that really, they're trying to sell beer. And they're also, the tickets are not as important to them as the beer. And so I would maybe bring like 25 people to a show, and they were expecting me to bring like 40 or 50, and these are small clubs, right? And I was like just so bent out of shape about it, and I could have had a really good show where I sang and played guitar really well and, whatever. But I would get so mad at myself, like, oh, you really should have called in some favors to friends to bring more friends. And, it's a cycle that's really dangerous and unhealthy. And thankfully I allowed myself to get through that and sort of see it for what it is. And, the music business it can chew you up. I mean, it's really, they're not clubs that really want to book you out of the goodness of their heart. They have a bigger picture. And so I think about how much I love like churches, and I love like this sort of folk music scene with house concerts. And it's bigger than just, making a buck. It's about community. It can be about, spiritual revelation. It can be about healing, and those kinds of things are really, as I get older, really more and more important to me. And, but I will always love pop music. I will always love, I can't, so it's funny because I'm recording this album, which we can talk about whenever, but, I love the sound of a professional, polished pop song, and I just can't help it. But that's okay. I'm okay with that. If like 5 people listen to this album, I'll be okay with it.
I think you'll get more than 5.
I know. I totally. Yeah, whatever. But I think it took me having to sort of figure out how to make money another way and like have stability in terms of housing and health care and, all the other sort of pieces that humans have a right to, mind you. But I sort of decided, as an artist, that I was like, well, I'm going to have to struggle and starve. And then I realized I'm not okay with that. It's not something that I personally can do. If someone else can, great for them. But I need a job that's stable.
Every time we I can only try to not break you. Yes, I believe in stepping around your heart insecurities, but I can't promise you I won't break you.
So going back to your first album, and I'm trying to remember, you and I were roommates in Chicago when you recorded and released your first album. And you had a day job, a full-time job with the Chicago Cultural Center when we met, but then you quit that job to focus on your music for a while. Was that during the making of the first or right before the making of the first album, or was that your second album?
That was before the making of the second album.
Okay.
I was in between albums, and yeah, I did. I got really energized by some of the press I was getting, some of the attention from labels. And people were like, dude, you got to tour. You got to tour. You got to, play all over the country and get yourself out there. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. And there was this narrative I kind of felt like I had to follow of like couch surfing and whatever, living out of a van for 3 weeks at a time. And so I was thinking, well, my current job at the Cultural Center is like, it's really flexible, but it's not flexible enough. I need to be able to like pick up and, do a tour and come back. And so I decided I was going to basically piece together 3 part-time jobs, which, was not a disaster in that I ended up getting a really good full-time job out of it. Mm-hmm. But it was a very sort of tumultuous time in my life where I think that was kind of the burnout part of life, honestly, is that I was trying to just keep these revenue streams coming in. And I ended up making less money than I was making before and having less benefits because I didn't have health insurance other than like very sort of catastrophic insurance, which was, whatever. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, I didn't have to use it. So that was, I think, kind of an impulsive moment where I just jumped at it. And I think it's, good to chase dreams. And I just kind of wish that I'd been a little bit more strategic about it.
I mean, it felt really scary when you did that and when we were roommates, because there was this part of me that was like, yeah, you're doing it. Like, go for it. Right. Live the dream. Like, this is awesome. Full-time musician. And then there was this part of me that was like, and you need to pay the other half of your rent. How are you going to do
I know. It was like, I think I was almost turning 30 at that point. So that was another sort of layer to this whole thing where I just kind of felt like, this is 30, really? And so, yeah, I mean, it was scary, but like I had a part-time job at Navy Pier, which if your listeners don't know is like, the largest tourism destination in the Midwest. It has a lot of programming and entertainment. And I was basically doing a lot of behind the scenes stage management and house management there. And I had a great boss who knew that I was also interested in music career. So thankfully I sort of established some roots there. And by the time I was sort of running out of steam and I was just ready for like something stable, still not giving up music, but just ready for wellness in my life, not be so anxious and, depressed. There was a job that became open there for a full-time production coordinator. And they already knew that I was, I could do the job and they already liked me and whatever. And so I got it. And it was probably one of the best things that came out of that dark period, honestly, is that I decided that, well, it's not the job that I really, really want, but it's going to really provide the stability that I need. And then the great thing about that job is that it led to some other really great pathways professionally, in terms of my work as an arts administrator and as a policymaker. So it's been, really interesting, wild ride. But yeah, I think, you were there really during a moment of my life that was one of the darkest moments in my life, actually. It's funny, I look back at it and I had to really just reach out for help, and just be like, hey, I'm not okay. And just swallow my pride. I think I definitely had that earnestness, that naivete, and that dream that was, I'd look at people who are in that place and it's like, it's so beautiful to see that light in their eyes, and I almost want to protect them and be like, they're going to be some assholes, or going to be people who are just indifferent to the fact that you're a brilliant singer or whatever kind of craft you do. Don't let their judgment or whatever it is, or the lack of attention, don't let that get to you.
Yeah.
And also, the don't quit your day job thing is actually really good advice. But I'm coming from a place of, I had a pretty traumatic experience doing that. So some people are able to do it, and if you have parents who can support you financially, it's great. I did not. I didn't have a mother who could be like, oh, I'll sponsor you for a year. And I didn't have that privilege. And I don't think many people do, actually. I also kind of wish I had done some sort of 5-year strategic planning. Now I'm in sort of government work. That's everything is about that, right? Or if you're a nonprofit fundraising, you're that's every day you think about that stuff. But I didn't have someone to be like, yeah, you're basically becoming an entrepreneur, Dylan. Do you have a business plan? Do you have a 5-year plan? And how are you tracking your success? And, what's your ROI and all that stuff? And I just was going about it with such a self-starting, homespun ethic, I guess you could want to call it that. I was just thinking, well, I'll figure it out,
Yeah.
and some people do, but they're lucky. They're the lucky ones.
Yeah. And I think music is one of those industries, or any of the performing arts or creative arts, where it really is a business. It really is entrepreneurship that will propel you forward. And you do have to think of it not only as an art and as a craft, but also as a business. And it's really not something that I feel gets talked about or that people learn even. And I know that you didn't go to school to study music.
No. English major here. Yeah.
Yeah.
English major, self-taught musician. There are a lot of programs now. I know Columbia College has a great program that is about entrepreneurship in the music business. And they didn't have that, at least when I was in college.
Totally. And that was the same when I quit my day job at the Lyric Opera and started my yoga studio, even though I knew it was a business, and I took a 5-week or a 7-week Jumpstart Your Business course at the Women's Business Development Center. When you become a yoga teacher, you're lucky if you get a 2-hour seminar about business. And so you have to market yourself, and you have to promote yourself, and you have to fill your classes, and you have to have a brand these days and all that stuff.
And when you're not working, you're looking for work, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the same for any sort of freelance or self-starting entrepreneur. Yeah, there needs to be more people like you, Andrea, that are the great connector between the creatives and the people who are bottom line oriented with business. In my other sort of jobs, I've learned about all these free resources that the government provides.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of artists really utilize them to the extent they should. Yeah.
It takes a fair amount of research and digging and asking the right questions and talking to the right people to be able to find it.
I think we need to find a way to matchmake librarians with artist entrepreneurs.
Oh my God.
Because librarians or professional researchers, they can find this stuff.
Yeah, great. Give me another business idea. Thanks.
Okay, sure. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Well, so on this show, that one of the things I like to talk a lot about is this idea of imposter syndrome. People talk about it in different ways, but it's sort of categorized as this set of feelings that usually very capable, successful, highly creative, highly intelligent individuals have, where they don't really feel like they can honestly own their success or own their achievements or own their capability. And they sort of deflect anything that comes their way in terms of reinforcement or positive reward or accolades or recognition, and almost in a way of feeling like a fake in their craft, or feeling like they aren't, even if they're not a fake, but feeling like someone is going to discover that they're a fake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is this something that you've ever experienced in what you do?
Yes, I have, actually. I tend to feel it, actually. Sometimes I feel like it in my day job, which is, I worked for 4 years working for the city of Chicago, doing economic development for the music industry. And then now I'm working for the city county of San Francisco, doing something similar for outdoor special events. And I think, I think it comes from maybe perfectionism, at least for me. I can't speak for everyone else, but I think I raise the bar on myself really, really high. And unfortunately, it can be unrealistically high. And so I'll get close to it or something, or having objective sort of hindsight, thinking, oh, I did really well there, But at the time, you're like, it doesn't have the perfect blah, blah, blah about it, or I had all these goals and I only accomplished 5 of them, not 7, And I think it does come from perfectionism from me. I'm also a people pleaser. And so I tend to, when someone's like not sort of demonstrative with whether they appreciate what I'm doing or else they're just having a bad day and it's not about me. They're thinking about something else or whatever. They're just deeply unhappy with their own lives. I take it personally. And so I, through a lot of sort of work on myself, have been just saying, okay, well, that's just the people pleaser there, Dylan. It's not really the truth. It's just this voice that's like, oh, you got to make people like you to be happy and to be successful. So I also think as a performer and as an artist, the people pleasing actually can be a useful tool because you're giving yourself to an audience. And so I guess the challenge is, how do you not give yourself away? How do you keep your own sort of soul, your own integrity intact? And if the work you're doing is met with deaf ears or just, indifference, which can happen at any time, you need to have sort of these reserves of your own sort of, worth, basically. Yeah. I mean, it's not kind of quasi pop psychology or whatever, but I can, again, I'm speaking personally.
Yeah.
And I think, looking back at the work you've done and the successes you've had, like taking an inventory of the successes, I think is a really good sort of antidote for the imposter syndrome, and be like, oh, that perfectionist is coming out again, Dylan, remember 2 years ago, you went through this before and you dealt with it and you were just fine. I think sometimes tracking your successes and taking inventory can be very valuable for someone who has that challenge. But, one of the things you said initially when you were presenting the definition of imposter syndrome is that, usually it's people who are quite capable, or if not working at a higher level in their work. And I've heard that before, and it's kind of comforting to me just to say that to myself too, because it's like, oh, I'm just having imposter syndrome, and I'm probably doing a good job because science says I probably am.
I've reached the upper echelon.
Yeah, it's like, I've arrived. Yeah, so that's my answer to that.
Back out west to desert Utah, desert light, peaks collide. We're so flat, so wide that they're unblinkable. Unblink my mind. Hear me. There is a place in the sodium light where I'll escape from the shadow of my mind soon as I get back.
And so you mentioned, working on yourself a lot and having some self-awareness and really taking care of yourself to move through these darker periods or periods that seem a little less sure, or, these feelings of perfectionism. So creatively, what do you do to keep yourself going? I mean, I know sometimes people feel like, oh, well, if I get too comfortable in my day job, then I just won't have the energy to keep up with my creative work. And I hear that in the group that I run here in Chicago, the Chicago Women's Creative Collective. People are frequently saying like, oh, well, I'm so exhausted by my day job. I just don't have any energy left to work on my novel or write my screenplay or make my film or book gigs and perform. So where do you find that energy and that motivation to like keep pushing forward? And even though you didn't get signed by the big record label or whatever, here you are making your 3rd album.
That's a good question. I kind of hit that exhaustion of day job versus creative life in my 20s, I think, which was probably a good time to hit it because I had to really wrestle with it early. And I just decided that I would carve out time on weekends. I allowed myself to be tired at night when I get home from work, and I allowed myself to unwind if I had to just read a book or watch Netflix or whatever it is people want to do after a hard day at work, because I knew that the means to an end was I need stability. I'm going to have a lot more to worry about if I don't have that direct deposit every 2 weeks in my account. You know what I mean? Like you sort of have to sort of prioritize and just forget the fact that you have an artist stream. You need to cover your bases because otherwise you won't be able to do your art because you'll still be so stressed out or whatever. You won't have enough sustenance. So I had to kind of accept that reality. It's like, okay, well, there's reality and then there's dream, you know. And then I said, okay, well, on weekends, I know that, you know, I'll be able to like get a good night's sleep and I'll wake up, and I'm also a single person with no children or no pets. So there's that other piece that I'm decided that, you know, I'd like to have a pet someday, but, you know, that's gonna be like a child. So someday I will. So I'll get back to you when I be able to figure that one out. But anyway, back to the point of carving out time and sort of allowing myself, like, you know what, I don't have to be working on my songs every single night or on weeknights. I can do it on weekends. And if it means that of the 52 weekends a year, I produce a little bit less, I don't care that. Some people are probably not going to like that answer because they're going to think that's just not enough time for them or not enough productivity for them. So, you know, I also know people that are able to work jobs where they're working like 10-hour days and they have 4 days a week where they work. You know, some companies are doing that. And so that means that you have one more day, you know, on your weekend to devote to your craft, you know. So just to recap, I think it was definitely the realism of needing that sustenance and then just sort of honoring the fact that you're going to have rhythms through your week. And if the rhythm is in your favor to do it on weekends, then follow that. And I also just think, you know, self-compassion is something that I've just been trying to cultivate a lot on the work on myself, and really sort of honoring the work that you can do and taking care of yourself as an artist, taking care of your mind and your body, and not to beat yourself up. Like, let's say you have some vacation time, which is a really privileged thing, you know, at least in our country. And let's say you have some vacation time and you want to go somewhere, be like, oh, I really should use that time to work on my novel, or like, you know what, allow yourself that vacation, you know, because writing and making music and all those crafts are also work. And so you need to allow yourself to refuel and recharge. And so I guess maybe it's cultivating patience. Maybe that's what I'm trying to get at.
That's a hard one. I'm laughing because you just described my entire psyche, which is as soon as I was old enough to work, so in Michigan, that was 16, vacations, like Christmas break, spring break, I never went on spring break. High school, college, I always worked full-time over spring break because whatever part-time job I had, I'd be like, extra hours, woohoo! Like, just work harder. And I find that in my adult life, too, is that I'll come home maybe from my teaching job or something, and I'll think, okay, it's 3:00 in the afternoon. I can do this, 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 and this, but I feel tired. Like physically, mentally, I feel exhausted, and I find myself trying to push through and be like, but I have to record this episode, but I have to edit this thing, but I have to do this thing. And it's horrible unless I just say, okay, I'm going to take 2 hours and relax on the couch and watch some Netflix. And the world is not going to come to an end when I do that.
No. And also, well, I know what I was going to say, and also not to discount those moments of absorption where you're taking in media or art. You know, I mean, that's, you know, being an active listener, an active reader, active viewer of a film is just as important as creating something. And so don't discount those moments of absorbing the material, because that's fuel too.
Well, good, because I'm probably a professional podcast listener at this point. It's probably a full-time job.
Yeah. I mean, I think that any successful, whatever successful means, I guess, whatever, any sort of artist that is able to be prolific and make really interesting work, I think also has a very perceptive appetite, or I guess I should say is also very perceptive and has an appetite for content. Because you don't want to work in a vacuum. You don't want to try to make your art without sort of knowing what else has been done. You know, you're trying to respond to all of the masters that came before you, right? Which can sound daunting, but you know what I mean? Like, there's context for everything, and artists are also cannibals. We steal, you know? I mean, that's crude, but my point is, you know, love yourself, honor yourself, give yourself a break, pace yourself. It's those little sort of moments where you're like, I feel really good. I wrote that page, or I wrote that chorus to that song. Wow. Okay. I feel good. I can enjoy that. But yeah, but also, I needed to get to that point. It took me a little while, and it took me having to understand that this day job is really, again, it's a means to an end. It's a way to create the foundation where I can make art that I want to make, regardless of anyone who listens to it.
So let's talk about the art that you want to make. Let's talk about the new album, the forthcoming album. What can you tell me? What are you most excited about?
Yay. So this album I have all of these songs in the back of my mind that I've been working on for probably at least 10 years. And there are these songs that I wasn't really happy with the lyrics, kind of felt half-baked or a little bit confessional or not very interesting, or like I was writing the same lyric all the time, And so I put them away, put them in the drawer, and I recorded another album. And then I was with another band called Software Giant. And then moving to San Francisco, which I did a year and a half ago from Chicago, I sort of looked back and I was like, I want to sort of get back to my solo music stuff. And I had all these songs that stayed with me for all these years. I'm like, well, I think they're still pretty good. I still like them, And then there's also the brand new stuff that I'm writing right now. So it's a really mix of old and new. And it's going to be definitely a lot of that sort of rock Americana that I think I'm good at. And I think it's still a development of my voice, obviously the voice you hear on the recording, and then also the writer's voice in terms of lyrics. And I think it's going to be more lyrically honest. It's going to have, I think, more subtlety and more complexity. It feels right. And I also was thinking, well, I really want to work with another fabulous engineer. So I was looking around in the Bay Area and asked some people that I trusted. I was like, well, I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm sort of in that folk rock, Americana, power poppy type, space. And all roads point to this place called Fantasy Studios, which the name is hilarious, right? It's like Elysian Fields Studios, right? You've arrived to Xanadu or something. I was very starstruck because I walk in there and it has all these like gold records from Chris Isaac recorded Wicked Game there, and love him so much,
and you've done a really cover of that over the years too. That
Thank you. Right, I love him, and he's from the Bay Area too, so it's like his spirit is amongst me. And so I think feeling kind of like walking into this hallowed space, and then meeting with staff who are just super professional and worked with some of the biggest names. I think there's still that rock star giddiness in me. I don't want to lose that little dream. But I'm tempering that with realism. Andrea will be proud of me. No, I just realized that, well, it's $100 an hour. And if I'm going to really do this and make this slick, really well put together, radio friendly album, I want to work with the best, and I need to raise the money because I don't make the kind of money in my day job that I can do that.
How much does it cost to make the kind of album that you want to make?
About $15,000.
Okay.
I've talked to any musician who has recorded in a professional studio, and they're not going to blink an eye when you say that amount. I'm actually doing it pretty cost efficiently, if that's a term, but it's a lot of money for me. I don't just have that sitting around.
So where's it going to come from?
It's going to come from my crowdfunding campaign. I've never done this before. This is a huge undertaking. Andrea, you helped me with a couple of these, I think, fundraiser parties that I threw in Chicago. Didn't you? Yeah. You helped me with at least 2 of them, which were great. But this is like a bigger sort of thing that I've never really tried for this much money before. So I'm going to go for it. I've already created some packages for incentives, including one from Andrea Klunder.
Yeah. So what I love about this crowdfunding being is that I'm dating a filmmaker, and I know a lot of creative types, and everyone's always doing a crowdfunding campaign. It's like, we're just going to crowdfund the money. We're just going to throw it up on Kickstarter. We're just going to throw it up on Indiegogo. And I've tried a couple myself and not been successful. And the percentage of successful campaigns is really low on these websites.
Oh, great. Well,
and I'm not saying that to scare you.
I know.
I see so many people who think that, it's like the fantasy versus reality, and doing the research. You can't just throw a cool video up there, put some pricing tiers, and then expect that it's going to work. There's a whole strategy and work behind it. And what inspired me to even reach out to you, I've known you as a musician, for however many years, since I was 22.
Right.
But I love that I received an email from you about this campaign, and not only are you crowdfunding, but you're crowdsourcing your crowdfunding perks.
Yes, crowdsourcing. Right. The perks.
which I think is genius. It never occurred to me to do it that way.
Oh, really?
No, I was like, I have to come up with all the perks myself.
Oh, gosh, no. So I guess I've had the benefit of seeing a lot of bands do this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. You got to ask your friends who you think will do it out of the goodness of their heart.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't make any money from it, you don't owe them anything,
Right.
You have to, when you make those asks of your friends, you have to make that ask really strategically and at the right time. And because I don't make this ask very often, I think it's been probably more than 5 or 6 years since I've ever done this kind of ask. I think that was helping me. I think there's creativity in the way you market and fundraise, right? So I'm asking for friends, if they don't have something physical to provide, like an object or chocolate chip cookies or whatever it is, they can provide an experience. I have a really great friend who's a comic actor named Rob Chester Smith, and he's going to help me do, he's going to provide an improv comedy performance. We're trying to figure out what that looks like. Maybe it's like 5 funny voicemails. Maybe it's something else. I don't know.
Wait, is this Rob Smith that you've been friends with since forever? It will be funny then. I have full faith.
Good. Well, I appreciate you endorsing it because I think he's probably the funniest person I know. And, and he is a very talented, hardworking artist himself. And so you may not realize that there are resources. If it's not a thing, it can be an experience. But also, one of the things that was really helpful too is just some people who I know who've done this, who are like, look at other artists' campaigns. Mm-hmm. You don't have to make it up yourself. You can steal ideas from these other artists who have been successful.
So as we're recording this, it has not launched yet, but I think by the time it posts, the campaign will already be in full swing. And how are you feeling about it?
Well, I'm nervous, but I'm giddy. Uh-huh. It's a healthy kind of nervousness. I've done some investment in this, so I worked really hard on making a promotional video that I think came across really well. Mm-hmm. And I've gotten some items to be donated from friends and some family. But 15,000 is a lot. So I'm trying to tell myself, okay, well, if you get any money from this, that's really good. Mm-hmm. Like, enjoy the money you can get. If you don't get any money, it's okay. You tried. Mm-hmm. You got to try. If I didn't try, I would be, damn, why didn't I just try it? And the other thing too is that, when I made this video, I was able to get footage of me in the studio performing. And so, if nothing comes of this video, at least I have, some really great footage that I can use as a demo reel. So I'm trying to look at it like, you have to invest money to make money, but it's not like I'm throwing money down the toilet. I do have some content that I can still use to get gigs or to get other musicians to work with me. Yeah, so I think, one of the things that the Indiegogo sort of cheat sheet that they give everyone is like, well, expect to make 30 to 40% just from friends and family. So it's that other 70%, that's sort of a gray area or a dark area for me because I think I could probably get friends of friends to notice, but the friends of friends of friends or complete strangers who are just like trolling on Indiegogo.
Right. Those mystery people who just troll through crowdfunding platforms and say, what can I contribute to today?
I know. It's like those angels.
I dream of being one of those people.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Earth shall roam as long as men are lacking self-control. Can someone find me a home I can't wreck? A home with walls as thick as continents that can't withstand my
So we're going to, of course, link to the crowdfunding campaign in the show notes for this episode. I'm assuming people can still purchase your first 2 albums somewhere. Where's the best place for that to happen?
Yeah, well, you can go on iTunes or Amazon. Those are the best places, I think, at this point, people to look.
Awesome. You've given a lot of really good advice for creatives and for artists already. You talked about self-compassion and patience and don't quit your day job. If there was one more piece of wisdom that you could share with someone who's listening to this show and trying to figure out the whole creative life, work-life balance, or keeping going on their craft, even if it seems like no one is noticing or no one is seeing them or hearing them, what would be one final piece of advice that you could give?
Well, I like to think that people always want to grow as an artist. And I think it's important to remember education and training. So if you are hitting a wall and you're not getting the gigs you want to get, or you're not getting critical acclaim, go back to school, take a lesson, take a workshop, and really work on excellence and pushing yourself. Because, the better you are, people will start to notice. There's that. And then I would also say, don't burn bridges. When you try to pitch yourself, on email or on the phone to someone who could potentially help your career, whether it's a booking agent or whether it's, I don't know, I'm trying to think of universal kinds of people that would help. Whatever industry you're in, just be polite and patient. I think just be careful, because you don't know if someone doesn't respond to your email, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're slighting you or that they don't care. It could just mean that they're really busy. But I've seen it. I've been on the other side where I've actually been someone who's booked concerts at venues, and I've seen bands follow up if I couldn't get back to them within 48 hours or something. Be like, just following up. I want to see if you got this email. I haven't heard from you. It's like, whoa. You never know when someone can actually help you. And if you need to ask someone to do that on your behalf, then great. And make sure that they are putting your best face forward. You know what I mean? If they're representing you, make sure that they have netiquette or whatever it's called. Mm-hmm. And they understand not to be too aggressive, because I don't know, maybe that's just me, my Midwestern side, but I just find that a huge turnoff. It's your aggressive approach does not bode well for you or the artist you're representing. And the quality of the work and the quality of the performance will speak so much louder.
Well, I think that's something that you do really well, and that's why you are able to send out, an email request to your community and your friends and your network and say, hey, I'm doing this thing. Can you help me out? People are obliged to help you and support you because of the relationships that you've built, because of the personality that you have, and because of the way that you treat other people. And I think that's hugely important no matter what field or craft you're in.
Oh, thank you. That's so, I feel that way about you as well. I really admire you. And when I was your roommate, I was like, oh my gosh, I hit the roommate jackpot. Not only is she just great to live with, but she's so kind and smart and giving. So I just want to make sure that you feel that way too, because you are definitely that way.
I'm telling you, I got lucky with roommates early on in my 20s in Chicago, and then I lived by myself for a while. And then I tried doing roommates again for financial reasons later on in my 30s, and I was not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It made me so much more grateful for my early experience.
Oh, well, good. Well, we can have positive memories.
Dylan, is there anything else that you would like to say or like to share with the audience that you didn't get a chance to talk about or didn't get a chance to say?
No, I think we covered a lot of really good territory today. I feel much better now.
Awesome.
I'm excited to be a part of your podcast. I think if more artists helped each other out, I think it would be a stronger creative community. There's definitely a competitive thing that happens, and especially in the for-profit arts. But I think at the end of the day, it's more sustainable to have collaborations and support within the industries.
That was musician, singer, songwriter, arts administrator, my friend, and former long time ago roommate, Dylan Rice. What do you think? Don't quit your day job? Don't keep your day job? Which is the best advice to follow? Which is the path you've been on? I'd love feedback about the episode. You can email it to me via the contact page at thecreativeimposter.com or post in the Creative Imposter Facebook group. I would love to see you there. Please do check out Dylan's music and the Indiegogo campaign. All of it will be linked in the show notes for this episode at thecreativeimposter.com/059. This episode was mixed by Edwin Ruiz of Mondo Machine. Our theme music is by Jovia Armstrong. And hey, have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? What's holding you back? What's interesting to you about that? Do you want some help? I'm teaching some free workshops in Chicago coming up over the next couple of months on how to get started with podcasting. And I also happen to do podcasting consulting and mentoring through my program, Podcast Envy. You can learn more at podcastenvy.com, and I would love to help you out. I thank you so much for listening. And I am wishing you a week filled with the perfect balance between the dream and the reality that keeps you moving forward on your creative path.
Then she'll comfort me. She's the only one who can strike me dumb with her laughter and shine. And Jane is taking me to the roof where she says we'll see everything. She said, take this cup, darling, drink it up, and we'll swim through the night. Say that you're seducing me, but you know that's not the way I swing.